Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the August 2024 session of the Richmond Art Gallery's Artist Salon series. My name is Kathy Tykolis. I'm the Richmond Art Gallery's Education and Public Programs Coordinator, and I'm here to host our program today and to moderate your questions. So first, on behalf of the Richmond Art Gallery Association, I would like to welcome you to this program hosted by the Richmond Art Gallery, which is located on the ancestral lands of the Hunkaminam-speaking peoples, which are the nations that lived along the Fraser River Delta, including the Musqueam. And I would like to thank you all for joining us from wherever you're zooming in from and supporting the Richmond Art Gallery's programs. In a few moments, I will introduce our guest artist, Michelle Sound. But before I begin, I'm just going to give you a few housekeeping notes about the program and about tonight's session in particular. So for those of you who are new to the Artist Salon, this program is a monthly series of free talks and events by arts professionals, currently hosted on the last Wednesday of every month from February to November. The goal of the program is to offer visual artists a mix of professional development, tips, and advice, along with artists' personal stories and experiences to help strengthen and build up our artist community. We hope our program helps nurture relationships between artists as a way to make connections in the community and to encourage all you artists out there to keep on making and growing in your art practice. The Artist Salon also exists as a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, which provides resources for artists in the Lower Mainland, such as artist calls for exhibitions and residencies, professional development opportunities, as well as local arts events and a space for you if you would like to connect with one another and to share your own openings, exhibitions, opportunities. So I welcome you to join the Facebook group, share your events with each other, and you can find out more about this group on the Richmond Art Gallery's website. And my backup, Melanie, has also posted the link onto our chat. So now we're ready for a great session with our guest artists. I would like to introduce Michelle Sound. She is also one of our exhibiting artists in our current exhibition, It Begins with Knowing and Not Knowing, that goes on until September 29th, 2024. I'm really pleased to have you with us here tonight, Michelle. I was really excited to have her on the program. I worked with her many years ago. We were just trying to figure out how long ago that was based on the age of her son. Because it was in more of an educational role. She was a guest artist back when we used to do a lot of summer camps for kids. And I remember her bringing her son to some of the prep sessions and some of our meetings, and he was like our little test subject for the projects. And she did some great workshops with kids. And then we brought her back right around the time of COVID to create some videos for our school program that you can actually still see online. And they're great resources as well. And since then, I just keep seeing her name pop up all over the place. I see her doing exhibitions and public artworks and residencies and winning awards. And, you know, from being in the background, just kind of nice to see that and to watch it. So I'm really excited to hear about your journey and all the things you've been able to do as a mom, as an educator, and as a full-time artist. So I'm really excited to have you back. And for those of you out there who might not know Michelle, I'm going to quickly introduce her via a written bio, and then I will leave and let Michelle take it away. So Michelle Sound is a Cree and Métis artist, educator, and mother. She is a member of the Wapsipipi Swan River First Nation in Northern Alberta. Her mother is Cree from Kenoso, Alberta, Treaty 8 territory, and her father's family is Métis from the Buffalo Lake Métis settlement in Central Alberta, Treaty 6 territory. She was born and raised on the unceded and ancestral home territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. She holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Simon Fraser University School for the Contemporary Arts and a Master of Applied Arts from Emily Carr University in Design. Public art pieces include a utility box wrap at the City of Vancouver, street banners for City of New Westminster, a printed transit shelter mural, and a painted mural at Osisiwan Arts Centre in Edmonton. Recent solo exhibitions include Neutral Ground, Artist Run Center, Daphne Art Center, Alternator, Gallery 101, Burrard's Art Foundation, Grunt Gallery, and Seymour Art Gallery. Her work has been featured in group exhibitions, including Burnaby Art Gallery, Audain Art Museum, and the Nanaimo Art Gallery. She has been awarded grants from the Canada Council for the Arts and the BC Arts Council, and completed artist residencies at Burrard Arts Foundation and Indigenous Arts Intensive at UBC Okanagan. Her artwork is in the collections of the Burnaby Art Gallery, Indigenous Art Center, Forge Project, and the McMichael Canadian Art Collection. Phew, so much. She's been very busy.
Very busy.
So, welcome, Michelle. I'm just so happy to have you here. So I'm going to fade into the background, moderate your questions. So definitely feel free to send in your questions throughout the session, and I'll let you take it away, and I'll come back at the end for the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathy and Melanie and the Richmond Art Gallery for inviting me. And thank you so much to everyone who's joined in on this sunny summer evening, or it's sunny where I am. So I always like to start off by just showing where I'm from. So this is a map of Alberta. My family's from Canuso in the little box there by Slave Lake area. That's about a 3-hour drive north of Edmonton. And my father's side is from a little more east around the Lac La Biche area. And so, yeah, just wanted to show where my family was originally from till they moved in the 60s. They moved to Richmond. That was where they first moved to BC, and that's where I was born. So I'm very excited to be in the Richmond Art Gallery exhibition. And I'll just jump ahead here. I just want to go. Okay, so I'll start with Ethan. This is my son, Ethan. This is him at an art opening. I was a board member at Access Gallery in Vancouver. And this is him at his very first art opening when he is 3 weeks old. So he started going to the galleries early and he hasn't stopped. I just basically drag him around everywhere with me. And so he's a little art baby that is usually the only kid at the openings, but he's a good sport about it. So yeah, he was there very early, and I just love that he was out around checking out art at 3 weeks old. When he was 2 years old, I was thinking about whether I was actually going to ever make art again from that time period of when he was born. And two, it really seemed like an impossible thing for me. I had finished my BFA, I think 2 years before he was born, and I had originally thought I was going to work in galleries and then decided that I didn't want to and kind of didn't know what I was going to do. And it seemed at the time that I was never going to make art again. How was I going to do this? How was I going to do this with a little kid? And when I didn't really have like kind of any art momentum or, I don't know, networking or any type of practice after I had graduated, really, because I, started raising my son. So it seemed really impossible. And so I decided when he was 2 that I, one, really needed to have like a better job. I was waitressing at the time, and I needed to have a better paying, steady job where I could take care of my son, and that I also wanted to like make a recommitment to art for me. Like I wanted to show that I could still do it, that I was still committed to my practice, even though I didn't really have one at the time. So when he was 2, I started Emily Carr, and yeah, single mom. And actually his dad wasn't even in the country at the time. He had to move to Mexico for the whole 2 years I was in my program because he had to wait for his permanent residency to get approved. So I was doing this entirely on my own. And so this is him out with me at my grad school art exhibitions that we were having in our studio space and on campus. And like he just came with me everywhere. There was no choice. I brought him to my classes sometimes. I brought him to the studio. I had to bring him to my, thesis supervisor meetings. When I had to go to the writing shop workshops, he just came and everyone knew. And so everyone basically just had paper and crayons ready for him wherever I was. And sometimes other students in the class were really nice and helpful and would be like, I'm going to take him for a walk around the block. So it was really like a supportive cohort that I had and supportive instructors. I was lucky that they also had kids around the same age and they were like okay with me bringing him everywhere. So he was basically raised at Emily Carr. And these are just some cute pictures of him hanging out with my artwork. Um, I had a show in the graduate space and we had this gallery sit, obviously, because we were the student volunteers. And so he just came with me. There's his little crayons, all his little people that just took over the artwork. The one on the left are I was making at the time these really large dream catchers out of hula hoops and kind of Disneyfying them. And he was little, but he would help me put all those beads on and put the feathers on. He'd like to help. So yeah, that's Ethan's little post-secondary put on his CV experience. And yeah, he just came to all the openings everywhere. I just love that little picture of him with his little water glass and a wine glass. Yeah, he was always really fun and people loved having him there. Like I think gallery spaces are great for kids. I know sometimes people are kind of like, oh, like they get tired, but I think if you are always bringing them out with you, they're used to it. And so he liked being there. He liked talking to everyone, interacting with the art. Um, so then I finished my grad program in 2011. He was 4 years old, and I had originally thought I was going to work teaching. I was going to teach in post-secondary, but it was really hard to find a job, and it was really hard to get, obviously, any that were like steady. Like sessional was really hard for me to think about doing like one class a semester or something because, I have a kid to support. I needed a steady income. So I didn't really know what to do, but I found this, and plus there's childcare to think about, which was really hard. So when I finished my grad studies, I started working at Four Cats, which is a kids art studio. I don't know if they're still around actually, but it was really great because I got to bring Ethan. So this is him in all the little classes that we taught, and he got to try basically everything, clay and painting and silk screening, all these fun little things. And so I got to bring him with me. And it wasn't really like at all what I wanted to be doing when I graduated with my master's, but it was the reality that I had of like limited choices when you are a single mom and like you don't want to spend $2,000 a month on childcare. And I was, for the first few years after I graduated, I was really broke. Like I had a rental subsidy. My tax returns were like $15,000 that I was making a year. And so it was definitely a struggle. And so in those years, I really was not making art at all. Like I probably wasn't able to start making even a couple pieces a year until I had a regular full-time job. Like I really needed that financial stability and like not be stressed all the time about my bills and groceries and all that kind of stuff when you have a kid. So there was definitely some really, really lean years where things were put on hold. So I probably didn't start making art again until maybe 2016. This is him at some more openings. This is very fun. This actually ended up being the Burrard Arts Foundation space, and he was always like a fun kid, and he adapted really well to being in these spaces. This is him. He decided to take the gallery invites and start handing it out to everybody, like he was the doorman. And it was funny because this was Dana Claxton's show, and he's there on the bottom handing her an invite to her own show, and Laurie Blondeau on the top. So yeah, he got to meet a lot of cool people that he probably didn't know at the time, but yeah, I think these pictures are really cute. And now he kind of just travels around and just gets to go with me, like I said, everywhere I go, and gets to see all these amazing art pieces. When I was in school, I thought I was going to be an art historian. I didn't really see art as being a job. Um, And so when I did decide to go to post-secondary, which was later because I didn't graduate high school and there was a bit of a gap, I went into art history, and that's what yeah, thought I was going to do. And seeing these works in person for me was amazing. And just like Ethan just got to go around and see them in person, like as a kid, which was amazing to me. And he, yeah, yeah, just has such a different experience with art than I ever had. We never went to galleries when I was a kid. I didn't know anybody who was an artist or who had, really gone to post-secondary. And so when I was figuring out all of that as a student, it was really hard. It was kind of like I had no idea what I was doing. And it's just really nice to see Ethan have a very different experience with that. And, he doesn't even question whether he's going into post-secondary. He's in grade 12 soon. And so he has this idea in his head that of course he's going to post-secondary and of course he's going to do kind of whatever he wants. Whereas for me, it didn't really feel like that was an option. So in probably 2016, I made these pieces. Actually maybe 2017. And I was when I was working at Emily Carr and I had a steady job and life was just a lot stressful, healthcare and benefits and being able to take my son to the doctor, and dentist, those were really big things. So I was making drums. These are elk hide drums. And I started to think about um, how I was going to paint them. So they were these star blanket designs with galaxies inside. And yeah, I started these and it was really interesting because I wasn't really showing them that much. Like I did a couple group shows kind of thing, but I wasn't really exhibiting. But these were seen on Instagram by Joy Arcand, and she had invited me to do a mural in Ottawa in 2018, which I was like, I loved her and her practice. So I was like, definitely I will do this. I had never painted a mural before. I had never painted anything nearly so large. And I had to do this in 3 days. And so I was like, yes, let me go out there and do this. I can totally do this and bring Ethan with me. And yeah, so this was my first time making public art. And it felt really important to me because I had never thought about making public art before. I never thought I could work on a large scale. I never had thought about my work going out in the public sphere like this. And Joy picking me to do this and seeing that my work could do this was really, really important and changed a lot about my practice and how I thought about it. So this is me and him with the finished one. And it was massive. Like I have probably the largest thing I had painted at that time was like 5 feet by 5 feet. And this piece was about 9 feet by 30 feet. There's a little guy there. And on the left, that's him helping. He was helping paint, but there were also these like gophers or something in Ottawa that he kept dropping the paint and like chasing these gophers. So he was like 11. And then on the right is him helping paint Osisiwan Gallery in Edmonton last summer. And luckily no gophers to chase, but he just kept wanting to go to the store and buy energy drinks. So, changing boy there. And so working on that public art made me think about my practice differently. And I started to look into calls, look online for calls that were for public art. And one of them was on the left, the city of Vancouver had a call for hydro wraps. And I could have done it based on one of my paintings and stuff, but for some reason I decided to be like, no, I'm going to do this as a digital painting, which I had never done before. I had to learn how to do all this. And I still was like, I don't know why I did this. It was so much harder. But I figured if I was going to do this type of work, if it was something I was going to do in the future, I was going to have to learn how to do this on my iPad. So I did the one on the left, and then I did the banners, the street banners for the city of New West, I think 2 years ago. So those are kind of fun things. Another way for me to work with the star motif that isn't always drums, because I feel like I do the drums in so many things that I kind of wanted to to branch that off in a different way. This was a piece that I did. I was commissioned by the Edmonton Arts Council to make a piece for a transit shelter in Edmonton. And so this is Sippy Kiskisou that I made. It's about the Papa's Chase Reserve and how they were illegally enfranchised. Like the reserve was sold off because settlers wanted that land. It was too close to the city of Edmonton, or Fort Edmonton as it was then known. So this band is still fighting to have their treaty recognized. And so this is the install of it in Edmonton in 2022. It ended up being a lot larger than I originally thought. So two of the other pieces from my Holding It Together series were added on the ends, which was great because those are photos from Treaty 8, and Papa's Chase band were born there, and like they traveled back and forth between both areas. So it was really nice. It's really nice to see that piece. And it was the first time I had been like invited to do a piece that was like working with the government and stuff, and it was definitely an experience. But it looks really great. And then this year, that same piece, Sippy Kiskisou, was installed in the Canadian Embassy in Paris. And yeah, I'm hoping to see that one day, hopefully. And yeah, so that I was invited to apply for this one. So all these kind of public art opportunities, I feel all directly come from Joy inviting me to do that mural. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thought about my art ever going into these spaces or ever applying for them. So it's just nice when someone else can kind of see that in your practice, and then you can, yeah, start to apply and think about your work in a different way. I also wanted to talk about residencies. So residencies have been incredibly important to my practice for the past couple of years. I live in Burnaby, Vancouver, and so it's really hard to get studio space here. It's very expensive. I mean, you kind of share a space with a bunch of people and pay $500 a month, and I can't really do that. Plus, I'd also have to drive to Vancouver. So I don't have a studio space. I work from home most of the time, but a lot of my works are very large. So, and this one was a residency that was at the Contemporary Art Gallery with not Wedge. No. I can't remember what they were. No, it was called a Wedge residency at the Contemporary Art Gallery. And it was great because it was local. My son was still quite young at the time. He was 14. And so I couldn't travel anywhere. I could never do residencies where I had to travel because I couldn't take him out of school for a long period of time, and I couldn't like leave him with anyone for like a month. So I didn't get to do any of these. And then this one was local, and it was a studio space, and it was for me a really amazing opportunity. Like it was a really big turning point for me to have that space, that time and space to like work for a month and have feedback, like the gallery, from the curators at the gallery, and bringing other people in to talk to me and help me kind of through this process. On the left is the very first kind of sketch piece that I did for my Holding It Together series. And in the studio space, you can see they are hung up on the wall before I've started them. And that was really great too, because the gallery helped me print these off. Because originally when I was thinking of this series, they were going to be paintings that I would rip up, and that didn't make sense and was going to take me forever. So the gallery was able to get these printed for me, which was great. So yeah, that was just a really important experience for me. Yeah, to have that support. And like I said, for it to be local, a lot of residencies you have to travel for. So at that time, this was 2021, I started making my Indian Auntie drum series, the one on the left, Indian Aunties. and the one on the right is my first, the first completed part one of the series for Holding It Together. That one is titled Canuso, and had it framed. And the framing of that was when I had to learn how to write my first grant, because the cost of the framing just made my jaw drop. It was, I think, $1,000 for each one. And I was like, I don't have $1,000. So I had to learn how to write grants pretty quickly. And which was great because I, for some reason, was very intimidated by them. I thought I just would hear people complain about writing grants and how hard they were. And I think the hard part is the waiting to hear back, but the actual grant writing is pretty easy, or the way they do it now. I think it's a bit different. So I mean, don't be scared. I started off with like a small scale Canada Council grant for 3,000. And yeah, once I got that one, they were easier for me to do. And so I've applied and successfully received grants from the Canada Council and the BC Arts Council. So sometimes, yeah, it's when you have to do it that you will learn how. So once I finished those works, I started to think about my son in 2020, started high school, and that was when I was able to start to make more work. I, he can get his own snacks and go out with himself, and that makes a big difference for being able to have some alone time and some studio time. And so I made those two series, the Indie Nanty drums and Holding It Together. And I thought, you know what, I think I have enough work for a show, because before that I was occasionally in some group group shows, and had never applied for any type of show because I just knew I did not have enough work that was going to fill up the space. So when I had those works done, I sent off some submissions and stuff. And that year, 2022, I had 6 solo and 2-person shows, which was amazing. And they were all across Canada. My first one was at Daphne in Montreal, January 2022. And I had ones in Regina and Alberta, Vancouver. The one at Grunt with Lori Blondeau was like a highlight for me because I love and admire her so much. So it was a really great experience. When we did this one, Ethan's in here again because this was very intensely COVID. The day before we left, Montreal went on like curfew, and you couldn't eat in restaurants. And so we went there and there was going to be no opening. And I didn't get to meet anyone who worked at the gallery because they were all isolating or had COVID. So someone came and unlocked the door, and me and Ethan had to install everything, which was an experience, but he was very helpful. And actually, yeah, I realized he has a really good eye for where spacing of pieces should be. So that was my first solo exhibition experience. And yeah, it was really great and helpful that he was there. So this was a very unexpected part of my art career, was being asked by Billy Ray Belcourt to use my art for the cover of his book. He had seen the work again on Instagram, and his editors reached out and wanted to use the cover and sent me like a mock-up of it. And of course I said yes, because I love his writing. And I just showing it on the left as well so that people can see the scale of what the original is. I think people are often really shocked at how big these pieces are. They're 3 feet by 4 feet. And people think it's actually like the book cover size, like I made the work for it, which I did not. So yeah, just showing the scale there. So, and again, that experience of having someone else see your work in this way meant there were all sorts of other opportunities as well. So these are some other covers that I've done, and I never would have thought that my artwork would ever be on book covers or be out in the world these these little miniatures. And yeah, I'm always like so excited to see it every time I'm in a bookstore and I see it, like, oh look, there's my art out in the world. Because I think, as visual artists, our art is usually like in galleries, and it's just like a nice little way to have you know, people have this little mini version of your work. So that's the Canadian version on the left of Jordan's book, Empty Spaces. And then the US cover is on the right. And it's interesting that they picked my art for both of them because usually they're not the same. So the one on the left was by Penguin and the middle one is by Yale Publishing. And I was surprised. And this was, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but this was hilarious to me. The one on the left is a painting. And I basically had like 10 days or something like that to finish this painting so that they could use it for the cover. Because they wanted it to have different colors than my drums. And then the one on the middle one there, they showed me the mock-up and I was like, oh, do you want me to send a file of the photo? And they were like, no, this is fine. So this is actually just a photo they grabbed off my Instagram, which I love. I love that it turned out that great. It's great. So I feel like my point is to a lot of people, like, yeah, keep your artist's Instagram up to date. The one on the right is by Dallas Hunt. He is actually my cousin, also from Swan River. And so he had me do the beadwork on this jawbone. And yeah, it's a great book of poetry. Get it. So yeah, it's just a fun way for my art to be like in a different space. This is another residency. This was the Burrard Arts Foundation, which I am so sad they are gone. This felt like such an achievement to be picked for the Burrard Arts Foundation because so many artists that I like love and admire had residencies before me. And this was an amazing space. I don't have a full studio shot of it, but it was, yeah, just this big studio. I was sharing with Becky Bear, and to have a studio space, again, local in Vancouver, to have a studio space for 3 months was amazing. I was able to finish my Holding It Together series, or mostly, like, I made 7 pieces in that time and then did the drums. This is the install. It was amazing too to have an exhibition included at the end. That doesn't always happen with residencies. So it was just a really great opportunity there. So definitely apply to everything. So this is a photos of my mom and Ethan. I live with my mom as well. I am the live-in caretaker probably since I was, I think, around 20. And my mom was in a car accident many years ago. And so she has mobility issues and, you know, doesn't have control of her hands and can't write and, you know, do a lot of things. She can't live by herself. So I live with her and Ethan. And so Ethan helps take care of her. This is him pushing her around at all my early art exhibitions. Well, okay, in the one in the middle, she's sitting with him and he's getting a ride. So there is that extra bit of trying to arrange like care for my mom when I'm traveling, when I go to exhibitions and when I do residencies and everything, making sure someone can stay with her and all that kind of stuff. So plus, I also have a full-time job. I work in post-secondary. I work at Douglas College, and I actually have no idea how I get everything done. So when he's now 17. So last summer I did the Indigenous Arts Intensive at UBCO. And again, that felt like a big achievement to be asked to go because so many people I loved had gone through that space. And so to be asked was amazing. It's a 2-week residency and they let you use the classrooms at UBC Okanagan. And it's amazing, just a huge space. And so this year was the first year that Ethan didn't go with me. His job was actually to stay and help take care of his kokum, his grandma. So that was interesting for me to like be off by myself and have Ethan in charge of making dinner and everything like that. He was still in school. He was still finishing his semester. So yeah, that was really great actually to have like that little bit of alone time for 2 weeks. And be able to fully concentrate on my artwork and not like, where is Ethan? And like, oh, Ethan needs to eat. Cause sometimes I was in there and just like dinner was beef jerky and chips from the vending machine because you're like really intensely working. Those are the pieces that I was making for the Richmond Art Gallery. So I knew I had to get them done. They had to be dropped off within days of me coming back home. So I really needed to get those finished. And I was having an incredibly difficult time getting them done because they were the cyanotypes. And I don't know what it was, but every time I rinsed off, I ended up wrecking 12 drums because every time I rinsed off, everything would show up on the drum except for her face. It would wash away. And I would be like screaming, crying that none of this was working out until the last 2 days. So it was really, really great to have that space there and get to work very intensely on my work. This was just very recently, just at Banff Center. So I have always wanted to go to Banff and do a residency. Everyone I know has gone and been like, you have to go, you have to go. And I never could because they're like 4 or 5 week residencies. And there was just no way I could take Ethan out of school for that long or leave. Like I can't leave him with my mom for that long when he was little. So this year I got to go and I was so happy. And again, Ethan stayed at home and took care of Cookum. She takes care of him, so he's not alone. And he makes sure they have dinner. Although they did order a lot of skip the dishes. The bill was insane, but they were eating. And I got this amazing space in Banff. And, the materials I work with are massive. The hides are huge. Like working with these in my house is next to impossible. It's just a nightmare. Doing cyanotypes and making drums in my bathtub. Just it can be done and it's a nightmare. My mom is always like, when can I have a bath? Get these out of here. And so this was just such a beautiful setting to be in a place where we were in hotel rooms and have someone come every day, clean the room, to not worry about cooking dinner because we had our meal cards and go to the buffet, and just have access to the studio space was just amazing. I just loved it so much. And yeah, it took me 17 years to get there, to wait till Ethan was old enough, but eventually I was there. And very important to have your friends in your residencies. Hi, Crystal. Um, so yeah, it was great because the Indigenous Art UBC is like invite only, and so there's only a couple artists there. So like the people who are there, you're hanging out with a lot, and it's really nice. And then in Banff, Joy was one of the instructors, which was awesome. And so I had little workshops too, where I was teaching them how to make elk hide drums, and that was really great fun. I love sharing and teaching other people how to make drums. I was very surprised that neither of them had ever made a drum. So yeah, great experience. I love hanging out with other artists and like being inspired by what they're working on and just yeah, getting to know them better. So that was a highlight, definitely highlights of residencies for me. I like, yeah, friends. This is what I made. One of the pieces that I made, I was working on 7 million things, it felt like, at Banff. I have an upcoming show at the Nanaimo Art Gallery that opens October 4th with Elliot Whitehill. And so I'm working, sorry, on 4 large ripped pieces, and doing large, like 24-inch cyanotype drums that are going to be a constellation, and then some other drums that I made in Kelowna, and those will all be in that exhibition. So I knew I had to work on those pieces for the show. And then this was what I had actually originally applied with, because the theme was working with text. And so I really wanted, I've had this idea for 3 years. And again, it was just not having the time or the space to get to actually make this piece. So the bunting of this piece is made from elk hide, and the pom-poms are rabbit fur. I've been collecting the scraps from my rabbit fur drums since I've been making them. I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these, but I'm going to save it. And so I just saved this giant container full of rabbit furs. And then I dyed some extra ones because I needed different colors. And just I knew I wanted it to be text, and I just couldn't decide for the longest time what it was going to be. And so this is actually taken from a button that my mom is wearing in a photograph that I was working on for the ripped pieces, and her photograph in her button says, "Damn, I'm good." And so I really loved that. It just seemed so her, and also like my mom who raised me as well, who's her sister. Um, just such an idea of these sassy Indigenous women with these buttons. Damn, I'm good. And the other one that I made, I didn't put the photo in, is one tough cookie. They were always saying they were one tough cookie. I'm one tough cookie. And that's always just stayed in my head. So I made another one like that. And I think I'll keep making different. I kind of want to make one that just says ma, like my kokum used to say, just this big sign that just goes ma for a really long time. But yeah, the residencies are super important to me getting my work done. It's where I get the most done. Just so intense and concentrated way. And I really love them. I recommend doing them. I am going to one in France that I'm very excited about. It's a short one. I will not get as much done. And I can tell I'm going to be spending my time looking for French pastries, but I'm very excited. And these are the pieces that are in the Richmond Art Gallery right now, because I know probably not everyone can see it in person. So on the left is my drum series, which is every photo I have of my mother. And it's not entirely, I had to make sure I had all the ones of her that were like in focus. Some she's randomly in the background of things, but these are, there's not a lot of photos of her. And the one in the middle is one of me and her. I actually only have 2 photos of the two of us together. And there were supposed to be 2 drums, and I tried every possible way to get the other photo to work, and it would not. Her face shows up or mine, and never at the same time. And I feel like it's going to be my life mission to somehow get that piece to work. But yeah, I really love the install that Zoe did there of them in the circle. I had no idea how I was going to install these, and I basically dropped them off and was like, bye, I got to go to Banff. So I was like, I trust you and I love it. um the other 2 on the wall there are 2 large ripped pieces. One is of my mom and her siblings, so that's my birth mom, and then there were 10 kids, and the youngest 5 in that photo are the only ones that had a studio portrait done. And I'm not sure why. I think this is when they lived in Edmonton. They had to move off the res when my mushroom became enfranchised. He didn't want his kids to go to residential school. So they did live kind of on the res in a kind of in between part between the res and the town for a bit. It was called the Jungles. And so later they moved around Edmonton and even as far south as Lethbridge looking for work. All that to say, I think this is when they were out of Canuso and the kids got a studio portrait done. And it was really nice to see. My Kokum always had that as like a pride of place in her house. But sadly, all the kids in that photo passed quite young. This is, yeah, some of the drums. Just the absolutely most frustrating experience of my life trying to get this piece to work. Crystal can attest to me losing my mind. as her face washed off every time. And then, yeah, it was a weird experience of having to, I feel like, start to work with her. I started to be like, oh, maybe she doesn't want this happening. So I started to once like smudge the room and started talking to her while I was making and be like why I was making it, and started to play Janis Joplin while I was making it. And then in those last 2 days, all the drums turned out. So I don't know, she needed the right music. These are some of the close-ups there. And like there are all sorts of photos, like little tiny ones from those little photo booths. The one kind of on the bottom there is from a Polaroid, and they have the cracks from the Polaroids. So there's just all sorts of different types of photos to work. And so I wasn't really sure if any of them were going to work out, but I was like, we are going to try this. So thank you to UBCO for letting me do that there. Yeah, and these are the ripped pieces. Michelle Band on the right is one about the Michelle Band that was around St. Albert in near Edmonton. And so they were another band that were like constantly being sold off kind of illegally. And then in the 50s was like entirely enfranchised. Everyone but 4 people from that band became enfranchised, and that band was dissolved, and descendants today are still fighting to have their treaty recognized as well, because Michelle Band was really uh really great agriculture land that settlers wanted. It was all farmland up there, and so it kept being sold off in little pieces, and then eventually it was like everything, the whole band was just illegally sold off. So that was my piece about that. And what's I gonna say? Oh, about how I was interested in learning about this when I learned that my dad's family is descended from Michelle Calahoo, who the band is named after. And that is it for my talk. My website and Instagram are the same if anyone wants to follow along. michellesound.art. And I thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble on about my life story. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. That was awesome. It was so great to see so much of your work, and you were so busy. Like when you said you had 6 solo shows and 2 group shows, how the heck did you do that and have a full-time job?
I have no idea. It was, yeah, I'd have to fly away like every week for like a month or something. And then at one point there was 4 shows happening at the same time. And I had to go to Regina, come back, and immediately start installing like the grunt show and stuff. And it was just like, oh, I don't know how this is getting done. Luckily, by like February, the intense kind of COVID restrictions had chilled out, and so the galleries were allowed to help me install again.
Yeah, because yeah, on top of that, having to install your own show, I mean, that's just crazy. So yeah, you are definitely one tough cookie. That is a lot of work.
Oh,
Um,
it definitely was.
and I love seeing, I mean, I remember you more from your earlier work with the hula hoops and all the dollar store toys, and just to see that progression to now. Do you think like your son and just sort of the way he's changed as well, it has changed your work, or is it just more about having more time? Like your work just feels so much more personal now than it did when I first met you those years ago.
Yeah, part of that had to do with the fact that when I was in school, I kept being told not to make my work personal. They kept, every time I was doing that, they were saying, no one will relate to this. There's no way for the viewer to see themselves in your work. It came up in my thesis defense everywhere. It was just, they were just like, take the personal out. You need to make art that people can respond to, or like that people aren't going to be like, I don't know what this work is about. And so just that idea that people weren't going to want to spend time with with anything they were, I don't know, gonna have to learn about. I don't know.
Hmm.
So it just I was constantly being told not to do that. Which is why I kind of went in another direction. And then when I'd been out of school for a few years, I really was just like, that's what I want to do though. I want to make art that's personal, that's about my family. And if people don't understand it, or if I guess if I am making art for two people, then I'm making art for two people. Like it just seems like what else was I going to do? Like I needed to make art that I want. This was the story I wanted to tell, and that's what I was going to have to do. Um, and it wasn't like I was like super busy and having tons of shows or people expected a certain thing from me. I, had just finished grad school. And so I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And then once it was more personal, people had like such a great response to it. They really were interested in it, even if, sure, you don't know all the history maybe um, about, Canadian history and policies and blah, blah, blah that affected my family. But there was just people were more interested in learning about it. And so, yeah, it's been super busy since then.
Yeah, I
Like it's
mean,
nonstop.
I see that with your CV, but I mean, just as someone who's in a gallery and gets to hear people's responses to work, I find that element of personal is always something that people are looking for. Like, they need some sort of connection. And again, they don't need to know your whole full story. They don't need to know the history, but your work definitely comes across as very personal. And I do find it like really strong. And people in the gallery have really been responding to that. And if they don't know the history, it does pique their interest to say, oh, maybe I will look into that. And which is also a really nice component to the work.
I think
That
that's really important. I think people are only going to want to do that extra step of like learning more about something that they're clearly like, I don't know what this is about. And if they're having an emotional response to it, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what's going to draw people in and make them want to do the work of being like, okay, what is Michelle Band? Or what is Papa's Chase? And so, my family's from there, and it even both of those involved my family, but that wasn't even a story that I grew up knowing, right?
Mhm.
Like it was something I had to research and learn about as well. So yeah, it's not something people are taught about, and it's just Google's free, it's easy, and we should know more.
Well, it's, leads to a question. One of the questions we got from Crystal, just your work includes a lot of archives, photos, and documents. Is research a large part of your practice?
Yes, definitely. The only thing about it that's hard for me is that I live in BC and I don't get to go to Alberta a lot. When I do get to go to the archives there, it's amazing, and I want to spend just like days in there. There's the Alberta archives and the Edmonton archives. And I really thought when I was in Banff this summer that I was going to get a chance to drive up there and go, but I didn't. Um, and so, yeah, I'm definitely always looking online and like doing that research, like, and going through the Canadian archives, which are really important for what I'm working on. Like, there's the Canadian and Library Archives website, and that's where I'm able to get the Indian Affairs Survey maps and like information from about my family, even like who became enfranchised and when, and like all this information about the reserves is on there. And then the maps, sorry, I'm trying to finding those is really important. And then there's another site, and I can't remember the name right now, but it's the Métis database, and there I can find a lot of Métis script records on my family and going through and finding out those. And so I'm always looking online and trying to go back home and like write down the stories that like my uncles and stuff have, and just trying to combine those, like trying to combine the official government records with our personal family history.
Right. Yeah, well, we have a few people commenting how they love the personal connections in your work. Meaningful and beautiful work was another comment. And, I really do think that comes out, and it comes out from your research and your materials too, which I had a question just about, just because I know, because you did videos for us to show how to do the tufting, and the drum making. And where did you learn those? Like, where did you learn those skills and techniques?
So I actually learned them when I was in post-secondary when I was doing my master's degree. There was like workshops and stuff available on how to do those. And then also when I was working in the Aboriginal gathering place, we had to learn those because we were teaching workshops a lot to students. So I learned how to make my first drum when I was a grad student, so like probably 15 years ago, and have taught so many workshops. And I actually learned how to do like the tufting there. I remember my friend Chloe, who often worked with me there, she taught me the caribou tufting and, beadwork. And beadwork was very intimidating to me. And I knew how to do it and I could teach it, but I didn't like to actually do it. Like I did not like beading jewelry and stuff. And I didn't make jewelry and I didn't make regalia. So I knew how to do all of this, but I didn't include it in my own practice at all until I started the Holding It Together series. And then I thought of a way to include these skills that I had in a way that made sense to my practice. So I was, originally just thinking of threading and beading the ripped pieces um, in those paper pieces, and then started to be like, you know what, maybe I'll try and see if the tufting will work, because I love doing the tufting, but there was no way for me to like work with it. I didn't know how to make anything with it that like I wanted to do in my practice. Like I just really did not want to make jewelry for some reason, which is weird because I love wearing it, but I didn't want to make it. So yeah, I started to include that in the paper pieces, and I just loved it. I was so happy to have a way to use that skill. And like I love caribou tufting and just love the way it looks, and just I found a way that it worked for me.
Mhm. Great, good. I still have my little caribou tuft I made in your workshop.
Cute.
Saying the same thing. It's like, what do I do with this now? 'Cause it's so precious, and I remember
Yeah.
how time consuming it was.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to do a bunch this week.
Another question that came up, it seems courage is a big part of your life and work. Do you have any tips for applying for a residency?
Um, so the first one I had applied for was the CAG, the Contemporary Art Gallery one. And I was just incredibly honest in my applications. I was just like, I would love to do residencies and I can't because I can't travel, and I take care of my mom and my son and I can't leave them. And this would be like, this would be so important for me. And I don't have a studio space. I can't afford one. They're hard to get in Vancouver, and just laying out, these are the reasons why I need a space. And then showing, what I was working on and being like, they take up a lot of room. I make them in my bathtub. Can you please give me some studio space? Was probably the main thing. Um, that they were like, yeah, we want to support your work, and yeah, it would be nice if your family could use the bathtub again. And that was definitely the big thing. Like I applied for that one. The Indigenous UBCO one was invite, and then Banff. And that was a similar thing where I was just like, I have really wanted to be at Banff for so long, and like years, probably since even before I was in my graduate studies program, and was just like, I've not been able to, but my son is older finally, and he can take care of Cookham, and this would be just really huge for me. So I was just like always very honest about the limitations I've had, and how these residencies would really, really help me, and they really do. They're incredibly important to my practice.
And I think it was a great tip you gave earlier, just talking about writing, your first grant. And you don't have to go for the super big one the first time around. I do think once you get one, it does make it so much easier to keep getting them. Same with residencies. I think the same is for public art commissions as well. Once you get that first one, it's a lot easier to get more.
Yeah, I really think you need to start small. Like do a kind of low stakes one, like the $3,000 grant was like exactly what I needed to do. And then I applied for a bigger one later. Like, and I think too, they need to see that like you've gone through the application process, you've completed your final report, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff already helps you when you apply for the bigger one. And same thing with the residencies when you're like, at my last residency, I was able to complete all this work. Like they really, I think, want to see too that you're going to use the time and space that you have, is really important. And then looking, I would say also looking online is really important. Like, BC Alliance for Arts and Akimbo and stuff like that, instant coffee, constantly looking out for what's available, what's coming up. And again, still a lot of them I can't do. But I'm always looking kind of to see which ones are like I don't need ones where I need to, travel for like a year or something like that. I can't do those ones.
Mhm.
But just always being aware of what's out there. And also like I keep kind of track of like where my friends are going, right? Like if they've had a really good residency experience somewhere, I am not going to the haunted house in Dawson, but everyone loves that place. But always keeping an eye on like where they've had a really good experience.
Mhm. Yeah, great tip. Which the other story that really made me go, wow, that's so amazing, was your Instagram story. Like the fact that your Instagram photo could be used on a book cover, but just that other people have found you through Instagram. I've been hearing a lot of complaints lately from artists that, with the algorithm change and no one can find me. And, I don't know if you have any tips on Instagram for artists.
I don't know if I have tips. I'm never going to do a reel or like videos and stuff like that unless I've been tagged in one. I don't really care about like there's like supposed to be this thing. They made us do job training stuff on this, and it was like you're supposed to do 3 posts a week and blah
Mhm.
blah blah, all this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm not thinking of it that way in like a business way, but I do know that like I guess posting regularly or whatever, having people find you on there has been like really important. Like that's how Joy contacted me, seeing me post some drums, the book covers for sure. I have had, and I know this is not normal, and it's probably not uh what you should expect to happen, but I have had curators contact me in DMs and be like, love to put you in a show. And then I have to like, a lot of the time I kind of have known who they are. It's not like
Mhm.
be in the show and pay $3,000 and we'll show you in, New York, that kind of stuff. So definitely watch out for the scams. If you have to pay money, it's a no. But yeah, like those type of connections I think are really important. Like I just have had so many weird kind of unexpected opportunities through there. Um, that's
Mhm.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
just keep posting whenever I have something new.
right. Well, but it's great. I mean, it's amazing how busy you've been and continue to be. And, we're looking forward to seeing more of your work and more shows and more public art and residencies. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you so much. Since we don't have any more questions for tonight, I just really want to thank you for sharing your story, your journey. It was really fascinating to hear and makes me tired just hearing about all the work you do.
Uh,
But really appreciate it. And for those of you who haven't been out, the show is still up until September 29th of 2024. And then, of course, Michelle, you're having another show at Nanaimo Art Gallery starting October, correct?
yes. October 4th, I think until January. at Nanaimo, and then I have an exhibition with Crystal Silverfox in New York, at the Diana Gallery, October 30th. And yeah, some other stuff in 2025, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll check out your website for more. And thank you so much. Thank you everyone out there for joining us tonight. Hopefully you can come back next month, and just reminded me again with Michelle doing your first public art piece next month for our salon. We're going to be doing some Procreate tips for artists.
Nice. Very
So
important.
if you haven't done any digital work on an iPad before, we're going to have a whole session just on how to get started. So thank you everyone tonight. Thank you again so much, Michelle. And hopefully we'll see you again next time. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.